We are joined on the line by Brother Zaid Hamid from Pakistan this morning. He is from Brestex, which is a private and independent Pakistani think tank and defense analysis consulting group. Brother Zaid, Jazakumullah for your time. Welcome to Radio Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, habibi. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum.
Jazakumullah. Many are going to say that this is the US now buying its loyalty from Pakistan with aid packages like this one.
You see, basically what is happening is that they are not buying the loyalties of the Pakistanis. They are buying the loyalties of the leadership.
That's it.
The issue is that this leadership, the present government in Pakistan, is one of the most corrupt, incompetent government Pakistan has ever seen in its history. And just like the Karzai government in Kabul, this government absolutely has no capacity to deliver anything to anyone. And now, when the Americans are losing their war in Afghanistan, they are desperate that Pakistan should fight their war to recover them from the mess they have landed themselves into. And literally people actually say that Americans now want to fight to the last of Pakistanis. And the fact is, as you very rightly said, that the strings that would be attached with this would be multi-pronged. And one of the most strongest string attached with this package is that Pakistan should declare war on the Afghan resistance. And starting up from Jalaluddin Haqqani, then Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Mullah Umar, what Pakistani military establishment has been doing is that they have been trying to ward off the insurgencies that have been sent into Pakistan from Afghanistan. But Pakistan has been careful not to antagonize or not to make the Afghan resistance hostile to the Pakistani state. Because Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and Balochistan Liberation Army, the terrorist groups which are being funded and supplied from Afghanistan, are waging a war against the Pakistani state, and Pakistan army is already preoccupied with this. Also the fact that Pakistanis have suffered almost $20 billion losses in terms of wealth, property, damages, casualties, human losses, the military hardware that has been lost. And if you compare that figure with the peanut figures that the Americans are offering, it's not a compensation by any standard but a bribe. And bribe also to the leadership. And this is something that Pakistani nation, the civil society now realizes. And now when Hillary Clinton came to Pakistan this time, we saw an unprecedented development that the ex-servicemen society, the civil society, and multiple groups, power groups in the civil society and media came together and presented a resolution to Hillary saying that our demands are not this aid and money that you're giving us, but our demands is that US should leave the region. US presence is part of the problem, not part of the solution, and Pakistanis can manage their own affairs. Pakistanis will manage their own water and security and economic issues if the Americans stop interfering into Pakistani national security and political affairs. So these are unprecedented developments, and the American government knows this now, that the tide, they have lost the war for the hearts and minds of the Pakistani people completely. The armed forces are now against them, the people, civil society is against them. It's only a threadbare holdings they have on this present government whom they are trying to sustain. And all these money that will be given to this government will not be used for water and development projects, but be siphoned off in corruption, as the record of this government is. So basically, nobody has any hope of any development from this package that Hillary has been offering.
Another question, Brother Zaid, that many would be asking, that the US itself is in trillions of dollars of debt. Where do they get this money from?
You see, simple. They print it. It's not even printed nowadays. It's just an electronic digital transfer. They simply say, we have transferred so much into your account. See, US is already running an overdraft. Chinese have been their bankers for years. All the wars that Americans are fighting all over the world are actually being financed by Chinese. And by buying the treasury bonds and paying the Americans supposed to pay them the interest for it. Now, the point is, American economy has collapsed. There's no doubt about this at home. And the explosion that you would hear would be overnight, would be sudden. Because we have seen the signs and the symptoms. Americans are spending almost $5 billion every month on sustaining their armies in Iraq and Afghanistan. They cannot do it any further. The losses, the number of Americans who have committed suicide has exceeded the number of American troops killed in action. The major differences between the US military leadership and the political leadership became very obvious just a few weeks back when General McChrystal was sacked. So even as far as the morale is concerned, as far as the military strategy is concerned, as far as the financing the war is concerned, US is now totally incapacitated. If their supply line go through Pakistan, and every day now we see their supply oil tankers being attacked somewhere in the country, and if this supply line is stopped, we can be very sure that Afghanistan will become the graveyard for another empire.
Now, the US wants Pakistan to disassociate itself from the Haqqani group. The first question is why, and the second question is how will Pakistan go about trying to achieve that?
You see, there are three major groups in Afghanistan who are resisting the American and NATO occupation. One of them is Mullah Umar group, other is Jalaluddin Haqqani's group, and the third group is Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Mullah Umar is primarily strong in the southern Helmand and Kandahar region. Jalaluddin Haqqani is strong in the eastern regions of Khost, Paktiya, Paktika, Lugar, Ningarhar, and around the southern tip of Kabul. And Hekmatyar group is stronger in Kunar, in northern areas, in Badakhshan, and Kunduz, and in northern Afghanistan. Now, Jalaluddin Haqqani is based, since not today, since the Soviet Afghanistan jihad era, since the 80s, Haqqani is based in North Waziristan. And he has his bases there, and those areas are areas where Pakistan Army has never ventured in the last 63 years. They were called federally administered tribal areas. Even for the last 200 years, even the British Empire could not enter into those areas. Now, this is the region where Americans want Pakistan to wage a war against the Haqqani network. Pakistanis have not done it, they will not do it. Now, the point is, basically what the American desire is, that Pakistan, when the Americans leave, Pakistan must not have any asset left in Afghanistan to exercise any influence. So before the Americans leave, they want Pakistan and Afghan resistance to be at war with each other. And this is a strategy. Pakistan is hedging their bets. Pakistan is resisting this American pressure simply because now everybody is seeing that Americans are going to leave, and everybody wants assets in Afghanistan so that they can control and influence the future geopolitics. So this is very understood game. Pakistanis will not be doing that. Pakistanis will not be fighting against Hekmatyar or Mullah Umar, despite the American displeasure. And the fact is that Americans have lost the war inside Afghanistan themselves. They have not lost the war just because Haqqani or some of his family members live in North Waziristan. Haqqani network is 99% based inside Afghanistan. Only the leadership, a few elements of leadership are in Pakistan, from tribal areas of North Waziristan. So, from a strategic point of view also, the contribution that the Pakistan army would play in the North Waziristan would be minimal. And it's the Americans and the NATO which have to do their own dirty job, which they don't want to do. Because that's the comical part is, that while they ask Pakistan to do more and not to have peace negotiations or peace deals with the Haqqani network or any other Afghan Mujahid network, they themselves are paying the Afghan resistance for protection. They are themselves paying Mullah Umar and Haqqani network for allowing the NATO containers and transport oil tankers to go through safely to the NATO forces. So while NATO pays to the resistance, they want Pakistan to have war with them. So this is something that Pakistanis are not amused and not buying it.
Now today the 9th International Conference on Afghanistan is taking place. So what are your comments on this conference?
You see, if you do not include Pakistan, if you do not include Iran, if you do not take the opinion of these two strong neighbor countries, then all these conferences you do would remain meaningless. And if Pakistan is having a strategic dialogue with the Americans also. And interestingly, Pakistan Army has involved itself into those dialogues, insisted that the political government should include the issue of water disputes with India in the strategic dialogue with the Americans, because Army feels that Afghanistan, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, Army does not need anybody's involvement. Army can handle it themselves. But now, if there is going to be any strategic dialogue where Americans want to give any importance to Pakistan, they should actually be dealing about the issues where the Indians are involved, with Indian presence in Afghanistan and Indian blockade of Pakistani rivers. So, this is how the Pakistani security establishment is seeing it. Pakistani political leadership is meaningless. They are only holding on to the power. They have no capability, no capacity. And under this, Americans are in panic, not just in Afghanistan, but also in Pakistan.
Finally, Brother Zaid, many are asking the question, and perhaps you can enlighten us, that with all its sophisticated technology and all the dollars at its disposal, to date, almost a decade later, how is it that America has still not been able to locate Osama bin Laden or Mullah bin Umar?
You see, as far as the war is concerned, anybody who has fought in Afghanistan knows that Afghanistan historically has been called the graveyard of empires. from their own times also, from the Soviet Union era, from the British era before that. They used the best technology of their time as well. But I have fought against the Soviet Union in the 80s as a young volunteer along with the Afghan Mujahideen. And Soviet Union at that time came with all the technology they had in the weapon system and the firepower. But they also had numbers, boots on ground. Soviet Union had more than 500,000 troops trying to contain Afghanistan, and they could not do it. The knights used to belong to the resistance. In Afghanistan, American and the NATO forces, along with the private military contractors, XP and Blackwater, they're not more than 150,000. And even the NATO is not involved in combat operations also. The basic fighting is being done by the British, Canadian and the American forces. The NATO is not involved in combat. So basically that reduces the combat troops to less than 75,000 troops. Now, with 75,000 troops, no matter what futuristic technology you bring, you cannot contain Afghanistan. And this is a hard lesson that the Americans are learning now. Because basically the terrain, the geography and the local population and their will to fight. The fact is that Afghanistan is at war for the last 30 years. The nerves of these people have become stronger. They can sustain war, action losses. American troops are committing suicide just by being under the threat all the time. Not even being attacked, under the threat of an attack, break down their nerves and start committing suicide. So, with this kind of morale, Taliban have a solid moral cause to defend their land, to liberate their land, to throw out the occupation. American troops, their morale, their armed forces don't see any reason for this war. They themselves see it's a useless war. They're only trying to protect one hill or another, one bunker or another, but then the Taliban pops up from some other direction. So in this environment, no army, no matter how technologically advanced it is, can fight. Army needs visible objectives. Armies need visible enemies. You can't fight phantom enemies with invisible objectives and then still hope and be an occupation force in a far-off land and then expect to win it. It doesn't happen in history. It never happened. Won't happen this time either.
Brother Zaid, Jazakumullah for your time. It was fascinating talking to you. Unfortunately, we're up to news and we'll talk again in the future, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, baby. This level, that means they're already doomed. It's only a matter of time.
All right. Brother Zaid, final question. I know we have a very, very busy schedule. Last question. You know, in the recent months and days, we have had many, many bombs at markets and masjids. So what is the reason for all these bombs at markets and masjids and also civilian deaths in Pakistan? Is there a third force at work? Tell us.
You see, Habibi, the American presence in Afghanistan have allowed Indians to operate with impunity from Afghanistan into Pakistan.
Okay.
And every weapon, explosive device, technology, weapons, money, everything that is being used in Pakistan is flowing in from Afghanistan. That is why you find two resistance groups, insurgent groups. One of them is from Balochistan, other is the Pashtun of the Tehreek-e-Taliban. And these ruthless people, they belong to the ideology of Takfir or Kharjis, perhaps they are called by scholars here. They declare the entire Pakistani Muslims as non-Muslims, as kafirs, you see. And they justify the slaughter and murder of innocent civilians and people and women and children and a bomb blast in masjids. But also the fact is that in Pakistan the judicial system has completely failed to respond to the threat of terrorism. In the last 10 years, the judiciary has not hanged a single terrorist. And when there is, the Quran says that in qisas there is hayat for you, there is life for you. And there is no qisas, there is no justice in Pakistan. Judicial system, judges are scared, police is scared, witnesses don't come forward to testify against them, and that puts the pressure on the army to engage these on the battlefront and eliminate them on the battlefront and not hand them over to the system, because the system has already collapsed, you see. And that is why the terrorists have the courage to operate with impunity. If the law is there, if the law is applied, if the nation supports a ruthless process of justice for these very ruthless terrorists, then of course I don't see any problem why this cancer cannot be treated, cannot be cured. It needs certain amputations, need to be done. One has to be ruthless because desperate times call for desperate measures. The world has not seen such ruthless terrorist bombings as Pakistan has suffered in the last 2 years. Pakistan will have to come out of the box solutions to handle these terrorists who are backed by the Indians, who are backed by the CIA. And the objective, of course, as we said earlier, is the balkanization of Pakistan. Inshallah, that will never happen.
Inshallah. Brother Zaid Hamid, Jazakumullah Habibi, you gave us a better understanding really of the present and developing crisis in that region. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala be with the Muslims and also project, and may Allah give izzah to Islam and Muslims. Jazakallah, my brother. Wonderful talking to you, and talk to you soon, inshallah, again.
Thank you, Habibi. Jazakallah khair. Allah yasallamak. Ma'as-salama. Pipeline deal with the Iranians, which the Americans never wanted. Pakistan signed a nuclear reactor deal with the China, which the Americans never wanted. Pakistanis are not going into the North Waziristan, while Americans are insisting that we should. We are not doing this. So all these are signs that Pakistani armed forces are now taking up independent stance. The story and the era of the Musharraf time, where Pakistan was towing completely the American line, has now come to an end.
Jazakumullah, very, very interesting story you just told us. All right, let's take it further, Brother Zaid. Kashmir, let's talk a little with regards to Kashmir. Kashmir is often a thorny issue regarding the two nations. What is at present happening in Kashmir? And why won't the question in many people's mind is why won't both nations allow Kashmir to be independent? Tell us more, Zaid.
You see, Habibi, the fact is, in 1948, when Pakistan was created, the founding father of Pakistan, Qaid Muhammad Ali Jinnah, at that time he said, Kashmir is the jugular of Pakistan. Whoever controls that jugular will control Pakistan.
All right.
Now, the fact is, it's not just the territory or the lands. As you can see now, after 63 years, all Pakistani rivers flow into Pakistan from Kashmir. And Pakistan is at 70% agrarian land. It's an agricultural-based country. So if you block waters, you don't need to wage a war on this land. You'll just simply destroy 170 million people of this nation by simply blocking their agriculture and water. So the fact is, Kashmir, on one hand, is critical for Pakistan. It is truly a jugular. From this point of view, that it's an access, it's a route from where Pakistan links up with China. All the rivers come into Pakistan from there. And on the other hand, for the Indians, for example, if there is no pressure on India, why should they make Kashmir independent? You see, people like, for example, in East Timor, when the United Nations stepped in, there was a massive international pressure, and they forced the Indonesian government to hold elections and make Timor independent. But there is no such pressure we see on the Indians as far as Kashmir is concerned. So Indians are not the kind of mentality they have, with the strategic clout they have in the region and in the world, that they would surrender something, without any external pressure. So, on the other hand, when the Indians feel that they can also block Pakistani rivers, which is a strategic stranglehold on Pakistani economy and agriculture and lifeline, then India takes it as a strategic weapon system to control Kashmir, not really under any pressure to give any concessions. So we don't see any reason why would India give any concession. And with the weak government in Pakistan, there's no pressure on India in any case. So as the crunch time increases, the pressure increases on Pakistan, the mood in Pakistan is going to get more serious, perhaps more violent. And Pakistan has already fought 3 or 4 wars on Kashmir, and perhaps the final war would also be on Kashmir, but that perhaps would be the war which would decide the fate of any of the two nations. Either Pakistan would overrun India because they're nuclear weapon states. The situation in that case could be unpredictable. There's no doubt about this, that the entire world is going to suffer if the pressure on Indians is not there today to withdraw, to lay back, lay off from their stance on Kashmir. It's not just a question of land and people and territory. For the past 62 years, Pakistanis have been delaying the issue, hoping that somebody would step in. But now when the Indians are blocking our waters, then it becomes a matter where Pakistan would respond, and respond ruthlessly, with or without the world with them.
All right, Jazakumullah. Jazakallah Zaid, you should talk to us more on Radio Islam in South Africa. I'm really enjoying your explanations thoroughly. Jazakumullah.
You're most welcome, and whenever you call, inshallah, you'll find your brothers from here with you.
Wonderful. Jazakumullah. Let's talk a little, sorry to take up your time, just a bit of Afghanistan. Zaid, hardly any news comes out of Afghanistan nowadays. Is Taliban in a strong position, and will they re-emerge to rule Afghanistan again?
You see, the fact is that the Americans and the NATO are the most confused, disoriented, and disorganized at this moment in any time in the last 10 years. And the fact is that Afghan Taliban are gaining ground every day. The very simple fact that the Americans are begging Pakistan to intercede and help them find an exit strategy is a sign of the US and the NATO vulnerabilities and weaknesses in Afghanistan. Now, Afghans themselves, the army that they trained, the army of Karzai, is absolutely incompetent in any form to hold Afghanistan once the Americans and the NATO withdraw from here. So the Americans have no option, either trying to hold on to it somehow, keep sending the body back, which they are doing now every day. Then they came up with the Lebanon option. As we said, they want to divide Afghanistan into hostile zone and a non-hostile zone. And then the third option is, if they ask the Muslim countries to intercede and try to find some kind of an exit formula for them, where they talk to Taliban. They have no choice but now talk to Taliban.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the Afghan Taliban. You see, they call it Taliban, but actually there are multiple groups of Pashtuns which are resisting the Americans. There's a group of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. He is not Taliban. There's a group of Jalaluddin Haqqani. He is not Taliban. So within the world they say Taliban, but within themselves they say it's the ACM, the anti-coalition militia.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a wider axis of Pashtuns. Basically, it's the Pashtuns who are resisting them. So Pakistan have a clout within Pashtuns very strongly. Jalaluddin Haqqani's men are based in North Waziristan, and Pakistan is not attacking them. And Americans are very upset about this for the simple reason that Pakistan want to keep their bet, hedging their bets for the future. You see, Pakistan has never fought any war against Afghan Taliban. Pakistani operations are only against the local Pakistani Taliban, who are basically backed and sponsored by the CIA and RAW. And who do not fight against the Americans, but fight only against the state of Pakistan and the Pakistani people. So this is something that the Americans are extremely upset about. So there is no doubt about this, that sooner or later, a grand coalition of a jirga or a dialogue has to be constituted, where Afghan Taliban will have to be accepted as a legitimate party to the conflict, where Pakistan and Iran will have to play a much larger role. Pakistan would be influencing the Afghan Pashtuns, and Iranians would be influencing the Tajiks and the Uzbeks and the Hazaras.
Yeah.
And the point is that Pakistan and Iran now have come very close lately, defying the Americans, and this is something that the Americans are very upset about.
Yeah.
So this is where, if Pakistan and Iran, with the Chinese at their back, decide to play an aggressive and active role in Afghanistan, NATO and the Americans have absolutely no choice but to accept to what these regional powers say and dictate to them, rather, because Americans now, their supply lines go through Pakistan. If any hostile government to the Americans comes, or the public pressure mounts, and the supplies of the Americans are choked from Pakistan, Americans are dead meat. Believe me, they are dead meat in 2 months in Afghanistan. Every drop of fuel they use goes through Pakistan.
Yeah.
And Americans have absolutely no way, no possibility to replenish or find an alternate supply routes.
Okay.
So Americans are totally dependent on Pakistan right now. And any strong government, and as the Pakistan army is exerting, but the unfortunate part is that Pakistani political government is corrupt, sold out. So that's where the problem is coming for Pakistani state. But as the Americans fear, this government collapses on its own weight, under its own corruption, and the army and the patriots take more aggressive role, we see the time that the Americans would be squeezed and forced to come to the terms that the Pakistani patriots give them.
Right, say Jazakumullah. One more question regarding the Taliban. Why are the United States, with all this sophisticated weaponry and technology, not able to find Osama bin Laden and Mullah Omar? Any news on whether they are alive and well, Zaid?
You see, about the fact is that Afghans are local fighters.
Yeah.
During the Soviet occupation, when the Soviet Union was there in the 80s, I was a young fighter fighting alongside the Afghan resistance. I fought in Afghanistan for 6 years against the Soviets, alhamdulillah.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
You see, so I know from experience that even the mighty Soviet army, there were 500,000 Soviet troops in Afghanistan, and they could not contain a single village. In the daytime they would, at night it was ours.
Yeah.
And Americans and NATO are only less than 100,000 troops. There is no possibility that they can contain a country like Afghanistan. And especially, they are an occupation force, they don't speak the local language, there's a betrayal within the Afghan army. Taliban has penetrated the Karzai government and the armed forces and the police. And over the last 10 years, Taliban have developed sophisticated IEDs, improvised explosive devices, which have taken more casualties of US and NATO forces than any other weapon. So it's basically nightmare, and you would see that all their latest operations in the south, in the Sangin district, in Kandahar, in all these regions, have bitterly failed. And in fact, British forces are pulling out from the deadly zones and handing them over to the Americans to be slaughtered there. And actually, there are reports, confirmed reports, that the Americans and NATO forces are paying to Taliban millions of dollars for the transit of their containers and for the protection and security. I mean, it can't get more comical than this.
Yeah.
That the occupation force is paying the resistance for protection. You see?
Yeah.
I mean, this is where it has come down to. So now you tell me, even intellectually, there is a reason why General McChrystal spoke out. There's a division between the U.S. Army and the U.S. political government. The Army commander of Afghanistan theater had to be sacked because he spoke out against the follies and the blunders of the political government. So this is what is happening. The number of suicide cases is higher.
Welcome to Assalamu alaikum. We're talking now, inshallah, to Brother Zaid Hamid, live from Pakistan, from the organization called Brass, and it is a private and independent Pakistani think tank and defense analysis consulting group. And they specialize basically in groundbreaking, cutting-edge research on the regional and international political, economic and national security issues as well. And they are devoted, mashallah, to providing thought leadership to the country at this crucial juncture in the history of Pakistan. All right, we'd like to welcome Brother Zaid Hamid on board Radio Islam. Zaid, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, brother. Salam wa salam, mashallah. Salam from all Pakistan to you.
Jazakumullah, my brother. Wonderful talking to you. Let's take it further, Brother Zaid. G.K. Pillai, India's Home Secretary, said yesterday that the perpetrators of the Mumbai attacks were clients and creations of the Inter-Services Intelligence, the ISI agency of the Pakistani Army. Zaid, how did they come to that conclusion?
This is, in fact, the mystery that nobody in the world has ever seen any evidence. In no court of the world, any evidence has been produced. And ever since the Mumbai incidents, the Indians have been putting allegations on ISI and Jamaat-ul-Dawa in Pakistan and on the security establishment of Pakistan. But all the indications have so far been directed towards the fact that there have been an internal job from the Indian security establishment, the murder of the police officer Kurkure, and the involvement of Colonel Prohit, the Indian military intelligence officer who was involved in internal terrorism in India, and even that was blamed on ISI. But later on it was discovered that Indian extremists, in line with the Indian intelligence officials like Colonel Prohit, who is in jail right now, and these elements were involved in orchestrating violence which was blamed on Pakistan. So the track record of Indians is absolutely pathetic in this aspect, that they have never been able to prove any linkages from Pakistan or from the Pakistani intelligence agencies. And the fact is that since Mumbai, Indians have been constantly trying to hammer this concept to the global audience as well, but they have not received any recipients. The Americans, the British, and the international agencies which were involved in the Mumbai incident have not come up with this conclusion which the Indian establishment has. And it has no substance, it's absolutely baseless, it's absolutely disinformation war, part of the propaganda campaign against Pakistan and Pakistani security establishments.
All right, Brother Zaid, Jazakumullah. And I think very correctly, as you are saying, that they are trying, the Indian government, they're trying to echo their baseless statements throughout the world, but no recipients to that. Why is it that every time a step forward is taken for peace between India and Pakistan, it is usually followed by 2 or 3 steps back, Zaid?
The fact is, you see, Habibi, that India have a massive internal security nightmare crisis at their hands. The Naxalites, the Maoists, from Tamil Nadu in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south to Naxalbari in the north and Bengal border, 40% of Indian Federation is now under insurgencies of the Maoists. That's the only place in India where the communists are actually gaining ground. And all the Indian technology centers of Orissa and Bengal and Bangalore now come under the insurgency hit areas. And the pressure on the Indian establishment of the government is so intense to handle the internal security threat of the Naxalites, the 7 sister states in the northeast, that they have to find a scapegoat to put allegations on someone. And the fact is, you see, that Americans have been trying to push Indians to come to a talk with Pakistan over Kashmir, because the Americans feel that if the Kashmir dispute can be resolved, Pakistan can be forced to divert its attention and forces towards the Afghan border. So that's why you find that Richard Holbrooke, who came to this region under the new doctrine of AFPAC, Afghanistan, Pakistan, that also had Kashmir on its agenda. So Indians have come on the dialogue table, but they are reluctant. They're not willing. There's no pressure on the Indians as such, because they don't want to do the American bidding as well, despite the fact that they are selling the Americans the concept that they can be the strategic allies or strategic partners for the Americans in the 21st century against Islamic extremism, in quotes, from Pakistan and the Chinese expansion. So while Indians take everything they need from the Americans, they are not willing to give an inch even to the Americans. So with no pressure on the Indians, there is absolutely no reason for Indians to give any concession over Kashmir or the water disputes that are emerging now between Pakistan and India. So naturally, the Indian establishment, while they come to talk on the surface, on the PSYOPs front, on the front of the psychological operation and warfare, they create this perception globally, or try to create it, that Pakistan is involved in terrorism, and unless Pakistan stops terrorism, there cannot be any dialogue. That's a face-saving exit strategy for them. In reality, the fact that the Indians are blocking Pakistani waters, Pakistani rivers, all rivers flow from Kashmir, and Indians are now blocking them. And whether anybody likes it or not, in the coming years, there's going to be a major war between Pakistan and India, not probably on politics, not probably on Kashmir, not probably on Mumbai or any terrorist act in India, but on water. And that seems inevitable now.
All right, Jazakumullah. What is your view, Brother Zaid, on the theory that Mossad and the CIA have plans to balkanize Pakistan? What is meant by this?
Habibi, that's not a theory anymore. You see, the thing is, whenever you come up, whenever you expose their secret game plans for the region, they try to discredit it by saying it's a conspiracy theory. You see, in the First World War, now we see in the perspective, they broke the Muslim world. They broke one Khilafah al-Islamiyah, and they broke Muslim world into 57 countries. And those maps were drawn after the First World War. And after 100 years now, nearly about 90 years from that time, the balkanization of the Muslim world had taken place about 90 years ago, they want to redraw the maps. And we are seeing this war happening like the 3 wars that have happened in the last 15 years. One of them, for example, that took place, that was in Europe. That was the balkanization of Yugoslavia, where they balkanized Yugoslavia into 5 or 6 countries. And that was the blueprint which they decided to apply post 9/11 in the Muslim world. Iraq, for example, you can see it now that Kurdistan has almost been separated. Shia region in the south, Sunni region in the middle, and Baghdad as a city-state. Iraq, for all practical purposes, has been balkanized. Afghanistan, now they are coming up with, blatantly coming up with the idea that we should divide Afghanistan on the Lebanon option. Lebanon option means the one segment to be controlled by, for example, in Lebanon it was controlled by Hezbollah, and the central government is controlled by somebody else. So they are saying the Pashtun regions of Mullah Umar and Taliban should be broken away from Afghanistan, given semi-autonomous state, and the rest of the Kabul and northern areas should be controlled by the Americans and the NATO. Now, similarly, the same game plan they have for Pakistan, the support to the insurgencies, the breakdown of the law and order, the breakdown of the economic system through the IMF policies, blocking of Pakistani water, creating an agriculture and food crisis, and then a massive disinformation war that Pakistan is breaking apart. Pakistan is a failed state, it's a failing state, its nuclear weapons are falling into the hands of the enemies, terrorists, for example. So these kind of massive, this is called the 4th generation war, in which you break up a country, you divide a country, not through a high-intensity war, but through small, low-intensity conflicts on various axes, either ideological, either political, either economic, or support to the insurgent groups like in Balochistan and in the tribal areas. So this is not a theory, it's not a conspiracy, it's a war plan in operation already, it's in the advanced stages, but Pakistani society had recognized this game plan at least 2 years ago. Armed forces were able to regroup, so society organized, coordinated, backed up the armed forces, and then the massive security operation in Swat Valley in the tribal areas, which has basically broken the back of the Indian-backed insurgent groups. And so now there is terrorism, but that is localized terrorist incidents not capable to break a country. The threat is over now from that aspect. But the government which is in Islamabad is a totally compromised, corrupt government installed under the name of democracy by the CIA and the Americans. And on the other hand, the IMF policies which are being, and the blockade of water, they are designed to create an economic collapse in Pakistan, a food agriculture crisis in Pakistan. So unless this government is removed immediately, Pakistanis will have to face a much tougher time in future. But the awareness is there. The nationalists and patriots are making a counter-attack in all axes on the ground level. They're raising their voices. The nation has been regrouped, reorganized, and alhamdulillah, we have by Allah, we have a role to play in this. And when the ideological and emotional and identity-wise the nation is revived, then the physical threats can be managed. It's only when the disinformation is so intense that despondency starts to develop in the society that the job of the enemies become easier. But now, alhamdulillah, there's a massive regrouping in Pakistan. The patriotic and the Islamic elements are grouping together. And the awareness level that the Americans wanted this game, has the media, the intellectuals, the youth, the armed forces have understood this game. And lately you would see that the Americans have been very disturbed that the Pakistan army has been taking independent steps, which are too much to the dislike of the Americans. For example, Pakistan signed a gas